While the modern world obsesses over retirement plans and nursing homes, there exists a parallel society where grandfathers never retire, never fade into irrelevance, never disappear from the fabric of daily life. In Amish communities across America, elderly men wield an invisible power that holds entire families together through methods so subtle, so carefully disguised, that outsiders walking through these communities see nothing but quaint old men whittling on porches or sitting quietly in church. But beneath this peaceful surface operates a sophisticated system of observation, teaching, and quiet governance that has preserved culture for centuries. These grandfathers are not retired, they are strategists, mediators, teachers, and protectors operating in plain sight while remaining completely invisible. What you're about to discover will shatter everything you thought you knew about aging, family, and the transfer of wisdom between generations. This is the hidden world of Amish grandfathers, and once you see it, you'll never look at elderly men the same way again. 1. The workshop where silence teaches everything. Inside a weathered wooden workshop, morning light streams through dusty windows as a 70-year-old grandfather and his 10-year-old grandson stand side by side at a scarred workbench. The old man's hands, gnarled and spotted with age, guide a hand plane across a board with movements so smooth they seem almost effortless. But here's what's extraordinary, not a single word is spoken. No explanation about angles or pressure, no lecture about technique, no step-by-step instruction manual. The grandfather simply works, and the boy observes with an intensity that modern children reserve only for glowing screens. After several minutes, those weathered hands pass the tool to small, uncertain ones. The boy positions it exactly as he saw, mimicking every detail his eyes absorbed. His first attempt is clumsy, the plane skittering across the wood surface. Without words, the grandfather's hand gently adjusts the angle, and suddenly the boy feels the difference. This is teaching stripped to its purest essence, knowledge flowing through demonstration, correction through touch, learning through patient observation. In a world drowning in instructions and explanations, this silent transfer of skill represents something we've almost completely lost, the understanding that some wisdom cannot be spoken, only shown, absorbed, lived. 2. The porch where everything is seen every afternoon. Like clockwork, an Amish grandfather settles onto his porch with a piece of wood and a knife. His hands move automatically, shaving thin curls that fall to the floor, gradually revealing a small horse, a whistle, a tiny cart. But those hands are merely going through motions learned so deeply they require no conscious thought. His eyes, sharp despite 7 decades of use, are watching everything else. The yard where grandchildren play and subtle social hierarchies emerge. The road where buggies pass and he can identify families by their horses. The neighboring farm where his son works, and where slumped shoulders or an early return might signal trouble. This whittling is genius disguised as hobby. A man sitting and watching would seem idle, nosy, perhaps even threatening. But a man engaged in productive handwork? He's simply industrious, keeping busy, staying active. The carved items themselves carry messages that only the recipient understands, a whistle for the quiet grandson who needs encouragement to find his voice, a cart for the boy shirking chores to remind him that work builds character. Outsiders walking past see an old man keeping his hands busy. They completely miss the sophisticated observation system operating in plain sight, the way those seemingly casual wooden toys carry carefully encoded guidance to each grandchild. 3. The church bench that governs without words. Sunday morning arrives, and with it comes the 3-hour church service where the entire community gathers on backless wooden benches. When the grandfather enters the room, he doesn't simply sit in the first available space or next to friends his own age. His eyes scan the assembled men, calculating, assessing, choosing with a purpose that serves the greater good. He might settle next to a young man known for restlessness during services, and suddenly that young man feels the weight of an elder beside him and sits straighter, controls his fidgeting, modifies his behavior without a single word being exchanged. Or perhaps the grandfather positions himself near a family experiencing difficulties, financial struggles, wayward children, marriage problems that everyone knows about but no one discusses. His deliberate choice to sit nearby communicates volumes. The family is not rejected despite their problems, the community is watching and help is available, accountability will be maintained. All of this transmitted through the simple act of choosing where to sit on a wooden bench. To outsiders, the seating appears random, meaningless. They miss entirely the strategic positioning, the gentle governance happening through seemingly trivial choices, the way an old man's decision about where to place his body shapes community behavior and reinforces social bonds that have held these people together for generations. 4. The dawn inspection that saves families at 5:30 in the morning. while most of America still sleeps, an Amish grandfather walks the quarter-mile to his son's farm. To casual observers, he's simply visiting, perhaps offering help, maybe just keeping busy. But this man is conducting an inspection as thorough as any military commander reviewing troops. The barn tells stories to those who know how to read them. Equipment left out in the weather suggests bone-deep exhaustion, a man too tired to complete even basic tasks. A neglected cow, her coat dull, her movements sluggish, indicates overwhelming stress, perhaps depression. Feed stored improperly, tools with broken handles not yet repaired, fence sections sagging, each detail adds to a picture of a family struggling beyond their capacity. The grandfather notes everything while appearing to notice nothing. Then comes the perfectly calibrated offer, "Noticed your hay wagon has a broken wheel. Want help fixing that today?" The phrasing is crucial, it comes packaged as if the grandfather has free time to fill, not as if he's stepping in to prevent escalating problems that could destroy his son's farm and livelihood. The son's pride remains intact while necessary help gets delivered. As they work together, gentle corrections flow disguised as wisdom sharing. "I found if you adjust this angle, the work goes easier." The teaching continues, the support flows, the family is saved from crisis, and no one's dignity is damaged in the process. 5. The mediator who operates in shadows. When two adult siblings find themselves in escalating conflict over property lines or inheritance or business disagreements, someone makes the walk to their father's house with 3 heavy words, "Dad, we need your help." The grandfather nods, completely unsurprised. He's seen this pattern play out across decades, knows how these conflicts unfold when left unaddressed. What happens next occurs entirely in private, invisible to the community that would gossip and judge. The grandfather meets with each party separately first, listening without judgment, hearing all perspectives with the patience that 70 years of living teaches. Often the surface dispute, who gets which field, who inherits what equipment, masks deeper conflicts that have festered for decades, old resentments about perceived favoritism, jealousy over one sibling's success, pain from childhood slights that never healed. The grandfather must identify these root causes that his adult children cannot articulate or perhaps even consciously recognize. His authority doesn't come from being their father, it comes from 70 years of faithful living that has earned him moral authority that transcends biology. When he speaks, his adult children listen because they trust his judgment, because his life has proven his wisdom. But here's what's remarkable, he doesn't impose solutions. Through careful questions, have you considered how this affects your children's relationship? He guides the parties toward their own resolution, reframing the conflict from who wins to how do we maintain family unity. The entire mediation happens without community knowledge, protecting the family's reputation while solving very real problems that could have fractured relationships for generations. 6. The living database that prevents disaster. The Amish grandfather carries in his mind a database that no computer could replicate, 7 or 8 decades of family and community history, tracking births and deaths and marriages and scandals and connections across hundreds of people. He knows who is related to whom through complicated family trees that would require genealogy software for most people to comprehend. This knowledge has profound practical applications. When a young couple begins courting seriously, grandfathers from both families consult quietly, tracing family connections back multiple generations. The calculations they perform mentally determine whether the relationship is genetically acceptable or whether it would create risks of inherited disorders that concentrated bloodlines can produce. But the grandfather also preserves stories that define family identity and teach essential lessons through narrative rather than lecture. He tells about the ancestor who walked from Pennsylvania to Iowa carrying everything he owned, about the great-grandmother who raised 7 children alone after her husband died young, about the family that lost everything in a barn fire but rebuilt through community support. These aren't casual reminiscences shared to pass time, they're intentional instruction, carefully chosen stories that teach courage, faith, perseverance, and the absolute dependence on community that defines Amish life. Evening gatherings bring grandchildren to hear these stories repeated many times, each repetition reinforcing lessons while allowing questions that deepen understanding. The tragic reality is that this knowledge dies with each grandfather, an irreplaceable loss that fragments family history and cultural memory in ways that subsequent generations won't even recognize. 7. The silent evaluation of future family. When a grandson begins courting seriously, the grandfather transforms into an investigator conducting surveillance that would impress intelligence agencies. This evaluation happens silently through observation rather than interrogation, but it's thorough and absolutely consequential. The grandfather's approval or concern carries weight that can determine whether the courtship continues toward marriage or quietly falls apart. He watches the young woman during community events with questions running through his mind. How does she interact with her parents, respectfully or dismissively? How does she treat younger siblings, patiently or impatiently? Does she work willingly when community projects require help, or does she find excuses to avoid physical labor? Does she dress modestly even when no one seems to watch, or does she push boundaries when she thinks she's unobserved? These observations reveal character more accurately than any interview or resume ever could. The grandfather also investigates the young woman's family discreetly, asking questions of others who know them well. What can you tell me about the Miller family? He learns about financial stability, reputation, religious commitment, any scandals or problems that might be carefully hidden from casual observers. He's not gossiping, he's gathering information necessary to protect his grandson from an unwise marriage that would bring decades of difficulty. When concerns arise, he doesn't forbid the relationship directly, which would likely provoke rebellion in a young man feeling the first powerful rush of romantic love. Instead, he raises questions privately. Have you noticed how she speaks to her mother? What do you think that might mean for how she'll treat you? He plants seeds of doubt carefully, trusting that his grandson's own observations, once properly directed, will lead to wise conclusions. When the grandfather approves of a potential spouse, his signals are equally subtle, including her in conversations, asking her opinion, speaking well of her to others in the family, offering the couple help with starting their household. These communications give the couple confidence while informing the extended family that the marriage is acceptable and will be supported. 8. The race to preserve dying knowledge. The Amish grandfather carries techniques and knowledge that are rapidly disappearing from the earth, and he becomes increasingly aware that certain skills will die with him unless he actively, urgently transmits them to younger generations who may not even realize what they're losing. He teaches weather prediction through natural observation, when the leaves turn their pale undersides up before a storm, how the behavior of cows lying down correlates with coming rain, the way certain clouds predict specific weather patterns. These folk predictions, accumulated over centuries of agricultural observation, often prove remarkably accurate. But younger generations trust smartphone forecasts more, not understanding that technology can fail while observational skills remain constant. He preserves traditional remedies passed through generations: which plants treat which ailments, when to harvest them for maximum potency, how to prepare them into tinctures and poultices. Tool maintenance and repair techniques represent another vanishing skill set in a world that simply replaces broken items rather than fixing them. Seed selection and saving requires knowledge that commercial agriculture has made optional, but that could mean survival if supply chains ever collapse. The teaching happens in casual moments. While working together, the grandfather mentions, "Let me show you something," in a tone that sounds accidental but is highly intentional. He knows he won't live forever, and he's racing against his own mortality to pass along everything essential before death claims knowledge that took generations to accumulate. 9. The invisible safety net that catches falling families. The Amish grandfather, who has lived frugally for decades while younger generations spent, accumulates savings that he deploys strategically to prevent family financial catastrophe. This assistance happens invisibly, carefully designed to protect the recipient's dignity in a culture where a man's ability to provide for his family defines his worth. He monitors which family members struggle: a son-in-law whose crops failed in a drought year, a grandson facing unexpected medical bills that threaten bankruptcy, a daughter whose husband's business faltered. The grandfather watches carefully, waiting for the precise moment when struggle becomes crisis, when intervention becomes necessary to prevent catastrophe. The assistance arrives disguised to preserve pride. Materials for barn repair simply appear. "I had these left over from my project and they'll just go to waste if you don't use them." Money for medical bills comes as a gift. "I'd been planning to help you with this anyway." The fiction protects the recipient's pride while delivering necessary assistance. The grandfather understands that in Amish culture, public charity brings shame. A man should provide for his family without assistance from others. But he also knows that everyone faces circumstances beyond their control: weather, health, economic forces that no individual can combat. His private financial support allows these situations to be weathered without public acknowledgement of need, without damage to reputation or self-respect. One grandfather with lifetime savings can function as safety net for multiple households facing temporary crisis, preventing failures that could cascade into permanent poverty and family dissolution. 10. The living lesson in how to die well. Perhaps the most powerful invisible teaching that Amish grandfathers provide is demonstrating how to grow old with dignity, purpose, and faith in a culture that has completely forgotten how to age gracefully. While modern American culture segregates elderly into retirement communities and nursing homes, removing them from daily life and relegating them to irrelevance where they wait to die surrounded by strangers, Amish grandfathers remain integrated into family and community, working until they physically cannot, maintaining purpose and connection until death finally claims them. The grandfather continues working though at reduced pace and capacity, no longer managing entire farm operations but handling tasks suited to his declining abilities, feeding chickens, gathering eggs, minding grandchildren, repairing small items, maintaining equipment. The work keeps him physically active while providing genuine contribution to family economy. He's not being humored or given make work to feel useful, he's performing valuable tasks that lighten loads for younger generations stretched thin by their own responsibilities. His body's decline becomes teaching moment rather than tragedy. He acknowledges limitations without shame or excessive complaint. My back isn't what it used to be, so I'll let you handle that. The admission models healthy acceptance of aging rather than futile attempt to maintain youthful capacity. The pain he endures silently, arthritis making every movement hurt, back problems from decades of physical labor, fading eyesight and hearing, teaches endurance and acceptance. He continues participating in life despite discomfort, demonstrating that pain need not prevent engagement, that physical comfort isn't life's ultimate goal. Most powerfully, the grandfather's preparation for death models how faithful Christians approach mortality. He speaks naturally about death without fear or anxiety, makes practical arrangements clearly about who inherits which tools and where he wants to be buried and what should be done with his savings. But the preparations lack dread. Death is simply the next transition, returning to God after a lifetime of faithful service. The peace visible in him provides powerful testimony to grandchildren watching and learning how to die well. In a world obsessed with youth, where the elderly are hidden away and their wisdom dismissed as outdated, the Amish grandfather stands as a living rebuke to our cultural madness. These men prove that aging doesn't mean obsolescence, that the final chapters of life can be the most influential, that power wielded through quiet observation and gentle guidance can reshape families and communities far more effectively than loud authority ever could. They teach us that the most important work often appears invisible, that genuine wisdom knows how to disguise itself as simple kindness, and that the strongest bonds are forged through patient presence rather than dramatic gestures. As you watched this unfold, perhaps you recognized what we've lost in our modern obsession with segregating generations, with dismissing the elderly as irrelevant, with believing that wisdom can be found in books and screens rather than in weathered faces and patient hands. The Amish grandfathers are dying, and with them dies knowledge accumulated over centuries. But their example remains, challenging us to reconsider what we've discarded in our rush toward a future that has forgotten how to honor its past.